this other big topic is, of course, the cost of energy, the green agenda, and indeed net zero. And that is a massive issue. So we had the Labour Party just last year announcing they were going to invest £28 billion of taxpayers' cash every year into the green investment, into heading towards net zero, which was a vast sum of our cash. And yet this week, on Friday morning, all of a sudden, Rachel Reeves is beginning to smell the coffee and realise that actually, firstly, we haven't got the cash. And maybe looking at what's going on across the channel in the European Union, maybe the direction of travel is slightly different. So she's rowing back on that pledge. Well, I'm delighted that we are joined by Michael Jacobs, who's the Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield and a former advisor to Gordon Brown of the Labour Party. Michael, a very good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. So this was quite a significant shift of language from the shadow Chancellor on Friday morning. It sort of slightly got lost in amongst all the other noise from the Conservatives. But what's your understanding of what's gone on in the Labour Party to make this, to row back from this previous investment pledge? I mean, some people are describing it as a flip-flop.
Well, you can understand why opponents of Labour are trying to characterise it that way, but it isn't. So Labour is still committed to a very large investment programme in green jobs, green technologies, renewable energy, electric vehicles and so on. So what Rachel Reeves has announced is that it won't be a spending plan which has £28 billion per year, but will get to £28 billion per year over the course of a parliament. So what would have been, let's say, 28 times 4 years of a parliament, 112 billion, might now be 80 to 90 billion. So that's still a very large commitment, which is indicative of Labour's commitment to tackle climate change, get to net zero, a legal obligation on the British government, adopted by the Conservatives, of course. But the really important thing to say is, why has this happened? It's nothing to do with the Labour Party. It's all to do with this mismanagement of the economy by the Conservative government. When Rachel Reeves first made this pledge, only 2 years ago, September 2021, it cost the government 1% to borrow money from the gilt markets. It now costs 4%. So it's not the same pledge to say we'll borrow 28 billion today. Of course. It's not the same thing as to say it will what it was 2 years ago. And that's not because of anything that's happened in Labour. It's because the Conservatives have so mismanaged the economy that it's now much more. In fairness,
actually, Michael, interest rates across the Western world have all increased. They've increased in the Eurozone.
Yes, but that's why the change has been made. It's entirely about the fiscal rules which Labour has and how much spending it's willing to do in relation to its fiscal rules.
So you don't think that it's... So what's going on in the EU? Because there's quite a lot of adjustment going on within certain nations within the EU. We've got a number of them, Italy in particular, and also Germany and France, getting very concerned about the impact of the ban on internal combustion engine cars, looking to delay that, looking to allow it for e-fuels. It seems to me that there's quite a sort of a deferral process going on of various conditions and constraints within the EU, and yet we're ploughing on regardless with, as you say, that legal commitment.
Well, I don't agree with you at all. Ursula von der Leyen has announced that Europe will be not just committed to the same 55% reduction by 2030 and then net zero by 2050 that the UK is, but that she will now have, in the European Union, a green industrial plan to match the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, which famously is providing a huge degree of subsidy to industries to invest in green technologies. And the European Union is going down that route because it needs to compete with the US. We're in a new world in which China is pushing ahead with its technological development. It is supplying much of the world's solar power, for example, and the United States has smelt the coffee, if you like, in your phrase, has realised that unless they get onto this net zero bandwagon, the jobs will all be in China and elsewhere.
But in reality, Michael...
Let me just finish. America said we need the jobs at home, and now the European Union is going to do that. And frankly, if we are not very quickly onto this, we are going to be falling behind. So the question is whether the UK can keep up with the major superpower.
The EU is looking to defer the gas boiler plan, and that's potentially being led within Germany. Heat pumps are clearly losing support from people in these various nations, and they're looking to delay that. It seems to me there's a gradual trend within the EU of saying, actually, this is economic madness. This is the wrong direction. The cost of it is too high.
If that were the case, why would Ursula von der Leyen have announced a new green European Green Industrial Plan with a lot more money to do it?
Because she's based in Brussels at the top of the tree. But it's the politician.
No, she really isn't.
She's at the top of the Brussels tree, but it's the nation really member states themselves, Germany and Italy, that are saying otherwise.
Richard, it's really important that your listeners understand the European system that we've left. She is at the top of the government's tree. She represents all the national elected governments and they make the decisions. It's just a myth that Brussels, a nameless set of bureaucrats, make the decisions in the European Union. They don't. They are made by the assembled leaders of the member states, of which we used to be one. We are no longer. And she represents them.
They're made, well, let's be clear, they're made by the Commission and rubber stamped by the MEPs. But the point is, it's the individual nation states that are rowing back on the commitments that have been made.
Well, I don't see this.
I
just genuinely don't see this. What I see are countries pushing ahead in much more difficult circumstances. Now, do you have to adjust things, as Rachel Reeves has done, when the economic circumstances are worse? Of course you do. We've had a massive energy shock, we've had a cost of living crisis.
Would you therefore say we should...
Let me finish, otherwise there's no point in having a guest. It would be irresponsible for any government to say the world is exactly the same as it was 2 years ago, so we're going to do exactly the same.
So you accept we should defer as well?
When the world changes, you have to change.
So you would accept that in terms of here in the UK, we should follow the suggestions in some of the European countries that we should defer the ICE car sales ban from 2030, and we should defer the gas boiler ban here in the UK, which is what's being suggested in Europe, to adjust to the circumstances.
We don't have a gas boiler ban. We don't have a gas boiler ban.
We have a ban on the sale of new gas boilers from about 2030, and there's a suggestion that it might be delayed from 2035. So yes, we do actually have a future gas boiler ban.
We don't have a gas boiler ban now. What we have...
It's on the EDF website, Michael. You can't lie to my listeners.
No. Nobody is banning gas boilers. We are trying to shift to a new... So everybody who's got a current gas boiler, you can keep your gas boiler until it conks out.
And then you can't buy another one.
There is a plan that when you buy a new one, it'll be in the early 2030s, possibly as late as 2035, the government will encourage you to move to a heat pump or to biogas, some kind of biofuel. So yes, but it's not a ban on gas boilers. Lots and lots of people will retain their gas boilers. It's a ban on new gas boilers, and you can't put them in existing homes. But let me ask you So, Richard, let's just be honest, and I'm absolutely... This is a transformation we have to do because...
And why do we have to do it? Why do we have to do it, Michael?
It's going to be difficult. The technologies are getting cheaper, but we have to manage all of these things. Nobody said this was going to be easy.
And why do we have to do it?
Is we have to look after the planet so that our children do not live in an uninhabitable world, and that's the priority here.
So let's just pick up on that, because we hear all these forecasts of catastrophic doom and there's an emergency. I'll just play you a little clip from Al Gore back in 2009, 14 years ago.
Some of the models suggest to Dr. Maslowski that there is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
So that was 2009, but the reality is, for example, Arctic sea ice...
That will happen this year.
No, Arctic sea ice. I've checked it out on the data from the Sea Ice Data Centre. Arctic sea ice is now back at 2004 levels. These forecasts from these catastrophizers are completely wrong. Let's look at a tweet from Greta Thunberg back in about 2016 or 18. It was. Warning that we'll stop, unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years, humanity will stop. This is complete garbage that is being spouted.
Yes. So that whatever Greta Thunberg, if that was a true quote, that was obviously silly. No top climate scientist was saying that. So the interesting thing about the one that you've chosen, or obviously you've selected one particular forecast is that Arctic sea ice is now likely to be lost during the summer months altogether, and that was actually something that came out.
But it's back to levels of 20 years ago. The direction of travel is going in the other direction.
The Arctic sea ice is variable according to the different patterns of weather that we get. But we've seen huge amounts of melting, and we are on course to have many years, not every year, many years where there is no Arctic sea ice. All you need to do is ask the companies that are now running tours. Literally, you can get a cruise now through the Arctic sea ice now because they are so confident that it won't be there. So these predictions have been a bit slower to happen in some cases faster.
So the predictions are being completely wrong, is what you're admitting. And the data shows in the last 4 years from the 2019 low, it's increased.
Richard, science is uncertain.
But we're told we have to follow the science.
No, nothing. If you look at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the authoritative body of all the world. Let me finish the point, otherwise there's no point in having a discussion. If you look at what they say, every statement they make, they say we have high confidence, medium confidence, or low confidence in that statement. They are scientists. They look at the evidence, they look at the projections in their models, and then they work out how confident they are. And they always they always acknowledge the uncertainty. So many of the things that they are saying now, they are saying with very high confidence that we are running into a world that will be desperately difficult to live on. And if we don't do anything about it, it will get worse and worse. That's the most...
I'm so glad you raised that, because actually I have, Michael, read the IPCC reports. Page 39, Good. Clause D 1.4. If we get to net zero tomorrow, how long does it say before the rate of level of rising of sea level will stop? What do the IPCC say about that?
Proposing net zero tomorrow.
Well, everyone's proposing to try and get it as soon as possible.
But
what they say is, whether we get to it, whether we get tomorrow. No, answer the question.
Just
answer the question, Michael, that I've asked you. You can't come on a show and fail to answer the questions.
Just give your views of fact. It's just not fair to be on a radio programme and then tell your viewers things.
Do you not know the answer, Michael, or do you not want to give the answer because it's embarrassing to your cause?
No, I'm just trying to give your listeners.
What's the answer, Michael? What is the answer?
Information. Nobody is saying we get to net zero tomorrow. It's 2050. That's
Fine.
25
Michael,
years hence.
Great. When we get there in 2050, how long will it take, according to the IPCC that you clearly adore, how long will it take for the rate of sea level rise to stop? How long will it take, Michael?
Why do you use such emotive language? I don't adore it. I try and listen to what incredibly well-researched science is trying to tell us.
And how long do those incredibly well-researched, clever scientists say it'll take for the sea level rise rate to stop after we get to net zero in 2050? How long?
A long time, because of the lags in the process. So we know one of the problems we have is that the current climate change that we're experiencing today, record temperatures, all these extreme weather events, these extraordinary fires in Canada, which are now causing people
Which happen every year in Canada. Answer the question. Don't divert it. Don't whataboutery. Answer the question.
What's the question precisely?
The question is, how long will it take, according to the IPCC well-researched, clever scientists?
A long time.
Right, I'll tell you the answer. I'll tell you the answer because you obviously don't know. The answer is between...
No, I don't know the actual number.
Well, then read the report, Michael.
Well,
because I've read it. It says, with high confidence that you referred to, between 200 and 1,000 years. This is an absolute nonsense. This is an absolute nonsense. We'd be better to adapt rather than to try and mitigate the unmitigatable.
Did you say this was when the sea level rise would stop occurring? So you're not saying this is when it would start being dangerous to places that are on the coast. You're saying this is when it would end.
No, that's not what it says. What I said is
but what's the fact that you're trying to give your viewers? What's the fact?
The fact is...
Say it straightforwardly.
I will tell you that the rate of sea level rise will not change for between 200 and 1,000 years. They do say that. I'm encouraged to say they say that with high confidence.
Hang on. The rate of sea level rise. So you mean the speed at which... So you acknowledge that the sea level is rising. So what you're looking at is that when it starts to slow down.
The truth is you don't.
So do you acknowledge?
You don't like the uncomfortable fact that we'd be better to adapt, Michael, than to mitigate.
Excuse me. You've highlighted a fact, but we're not quite sure what this fact is. Are you saying that you acknowledge that sea levels are rising?
Yes, absolutely.
What you're saying is it will only slow down.
Everybody, and how much is sea level rising per year? How much is sea level rising per year?
They're not rising, does it?
How much is sea level rising in the UK per year, Michael?
At the moment, very little.
Right, so you accept it's very little. The IPCC accepts that it won't make much difference if we get to nearer between 200 and 1,000 years. Wouldn't we be better to invest a little bit in some sea level defences rather than trying to stop the unstoppable?
It will slow down.
For between 200 and 1,000 years.
Now, that means that the rate is still rising, doesn't it?
Yes.
So we will see sea level rise in this century.
You've just admitted that sea level is rising very, very little. I'll tell you the answer, because you don't seem to know many answers. It's between 1.5 and 2.5 millimetres a year. That's 2.5 centimetres a decade.
Do you not see all these extreme weather events occurring with much greater frequency and much more severely?
Again, you're clearly deluded from the data, Michael. The data absolutely shows. For example, there is no increase. There is no increase in major or hurricanes in the last 100 years.
You focused on the slowest of all the impacts, which is sea level rise. We've always known that that is the slowest of all the impacts. Why don't we pick the ones that are already happening? The increased frequency of forest fires, of droughts, of hurricanes, of cyclones, and of extreme temperatures. Do you agree that we're having more of those because every year is getting warmer than we used to?
I'm looking at the graph.
Do you agree?
I'm looking at the graph of forest fires in Canada that happen every single year. No, I don't actually, because I've got graphs.
No, you don't agree that these things we can actually see. So these are not predictions of the future, but actually things you can see.
Michael,
you don't think they're happening.
If you look at the graph of Canada forest fires in the last 43 years since 1980, every single year, millions of hectares get burnt in Canada in thousands and thousands of forest fires. This happens every single year.
So
some years it's more, some years it's less. Every year there are major hurricanes. Every year there are minor hurricanes. There's no increase in the number of hurricanes in the last 50 to 100 years. The truth is, the data doesn't support what you're saying.
Well, why is it that 99%, more than 99%, of all scientific papers on climate change say that it is? Why is it that you, who are not a trained climate scientist, think that you know better?
I'm so glad you raised that.
You're referring through university, studied the data, and have said.
I'm so glad you raised that, because what you're referring to is the Cook analysis.
Why is it, Richard, that only you know this and all the climate scientists don't?
What about the 1,000 climate scientists?
Why do you think you have
you do seem quite cross, actually,
to deny
Michael,
all the climate science?
Because there's about 1,000 plus experts and scientists, wise people,
in an organisation
called they came up with the World Climate Declaration. It's an organisation called Clintel. Many, many experts within who actually support the position that I've just put forward.
Can you name a single reputable climate scientist in that group?
I haven't got the list in front of me. Yeah, there are many, many experts.
Got the list. So, in fact, when you say, Michael, you don't have the knowledge about whatever the IPCC said about silence,
the 97% figure you just used.
You don't even know who supports your own case.
There's a list of over 1,000 people, Michael.
Over 1,000, and there are thousands and thousands of climate scientists. If you could name a single reputable climate scientist in that group,
a Nobel laureate, Professor Ivor Giver from the USA, Professor Gus Burkhout, Dr. Cornelius Lepere from the Netherlands. These are all lots of experts in a variety.
What are their specialisms?
Lots of experts who have put forward. They are the ambassadors of the World Climate Declaration. Isn't the reality that it's good to debate this thing? Isn't the reality that people on your side of the debate, you want to shut down debate, you want to prevent debate? But the facts are...
Why is it that every country in the world is going down this path? It's not the UK, it's not the EU, it's not even all of us and the US. It's China, it's India, it's Brazil, all of the Africa.
And what I'm trying to do...
We're all concerned about this because that's what the science says.
Michael,
why is it only you who think you know better than every government in the world?
Why is it that China are building coal-fired power stations as we speak in order to produce cheap fossil-fueled energy? Why is it that China haven't legally signed up to net zero?
Vast amounts of solar and wind power.
They are making vast amounts. They're actually one of the biggest countries in the world. That is for sure. But the reality is they're still building.
They have a hugely growing economy. So they need more power. Some of that is
with
coal,
cheap energy,
but much of it is solar and wind.
With cheap energy. Using coal and new coal-fired power stations, and they haven't legally signed up to net zero for 2050, by the way. They've said they might move towards it 10 or 20 years later.
No, India's they said 2060. They said 2060.
But it's not a binding commitment. India's said 2070. These nations, they're looking. Look, we're all looking to reduce emissions. They're not foolish enough to legally commit and impoverish their economy.
Caused the problem. The problem has been caused. China's caused part of the problem. India has caused none of it because its emissions have been too low.
So we've caused the problem, haven't we?
The problem has been caused by developed economies which have been industrialising for 200 years. We didn't know we were causing the problem until relatively recently.
We represent 1% of emissions, Michael.
Let me finish. It's the fossil fuels that we have burnt over 200 years of industrialisation that have caused the problem by filling the atmosphere. So it's understandable that poorer countries want to grow, want to improve their incomes, but they are also on this path to net zero. The whole world is, Richard. It's only you and a few people who deny the climate science who think that you know better than every government in the world. And it really is rather extraordinary.
What's extraordinary is
you have the knowledge that all of these governments and all of these scientists don't have.
I'm looking at lots of other scientists who've got a very, very different view, and I'm saying we should have a proper grown-up debate without people like you getting...
That's exactly what we do. Every year we debate this. What is this debate we're having now?
You're trying to deny the debate because you're claiming that it's facts.
No,
you're claiming that I'm the only person that's denying this. When I put the facts to you about what the IPCC report says, you actually don't seem to rather like it. Michael, unfortunately, time
is... It's not a question of not liking it. But Richard, I don't think you understand science, do you?
Michael,
science is about
I understand what I read in the IPCC reports.
Science is about the evidence we have. So it's not a question of liking it or not. You're entitled to your own views, absolutely,
and the
evidence... you're not entitled to your own facts.
And actually, also, remember, Michael...
which come from science.
Yes, and the science, there's no such thing as the science. There are scientists who challenge each other.
99% of all scientific papers on this subject.
That is not the case.
Agree.
And again, that is not the case. You're referring to the Cook analysis from 2013 when they were asked how many of those papers said that actually humans were inducing global warming. Two-thirds of the papers two-thirds of the papers said actually they didn't have a view as to whether or not humans were causing the majority of global warming. You're referring to about 97% of just over 30%. The facts are important indeed, Michael. We've got to go to a break, but I'm so glad that you've come on. We've had an energetic debate. Debate is good. It's important. But some people want to shut it down. I think it's important. Thank you very much, Michael Jacobs, Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield. It's Tice Talk. It's talkTV.